We're ready to knit our first round on our 2 at a time socks. We're in ready position. The needle with the working yarn attached to it is in the back. There, see it's farther away from me. Last step is to take the working yarn and bring it up from between the needles and lay it over the back, just like we practiced for magic loop, so that it doesn't get stuck in the loop later on. So now, just ignoring the fact that we've got another set of stitches here, although we do need to make sure that the stitches aren't falling down like this. That is something that we cannot ignore. So go ahead and keep them pushed up like this so that they are close but separate like that. And let's start knitting. Okay, so I've got no twist in my round, I'm ready to begin. And I don't need to actually put a marker in here. I know that this is the beginning of the round because I've got the tail right here. So with our working yarn laid over the back needle just like that, let's pull our back needle out. Come back. We don't want to pull it too far out. Remember, we always want these loops to be pretty much the same size, so don't pull it like that. You'll stretch your stitches out. Okay, so with 2 loops of the same size, just like that, we're ready to knit. And we're going to be working in ribbing, okay? So insert your needle into the first stitch. Your yarn should be right back here, ready for you to knit with, and go ahead and knit that very first stitch, and that will join your round. And please hold this cable close to your knitting, okay? When you make this stitch, like that. We don't want to crank down on it, but what we also don't want is for it to look something like this, with it hanging down like this. So use your fingers and just hold it close and tighten it up a little bit. And moving the yarn to the front to purl. Oops. Like that. So we're going to go ahead and work in 1 by 1 rib like this, and you can see that I decided to knit my stitches through the back loop just the first time. I'm purling through the front loop, but oops, it's a lot easier to get into that tiny stitch on our cast on row if we go into the back loop like that. Okay, so go ahead and work in rib all the way to the end of these stitches. So I've finished ribbing all the way across the first half of this first sock. So leaving these stitches just where they are, don't pull this needle or anything like you may be used to doing for just single magic loop. We're going to go directly to this set of stitches and do the same thing. We're going to begin our round. So let's make sure that the working yarn is coming off the back needle, and I know this is strange because there's not really a needle back here, it's a cable. And the reason for that is we already pulled that back needle out and turn it around so that we could knit the first sock, so that's why it's a cable, but it's still the back needle, and here's our working yarn. It's attached to it and it is already over the back. If it's not, it would look something like this. It would be hanging down, straight down like that. So if that's the case, now this one's the tail, I'm not going to worry about that one. If that's the case though, go ahead and bring it between the tips of your needles like this and over the back. That's how you can get it back there. Okay, so let's make sure there are no twists in our round. All of the little knots are on the inside and they're all facing each other. Good. Alright, we are ready to knit, so push your stitches up to the tip. And we're going to join this round. There's our yarn back there right where we need it. We're going to join this round just by knitting the very first stitch. Like that. And bringing this cable close like this. So see how I'm not just holding it like 2 halves like this, but then I'm really turning this so that there's no join at all, just like that. There we go. Alright, so go ahead and work in ribbing now. And I'm going to go ahead and knit those knit stitches through the back loops just for the cast on row. And you can see I'm using pretty tiny needles. That's because I knit looser than most people, so I'm using size 1s. You may not be on such small needles because I checked my gauge before this. So let's go to the end of this half of stitches right here. I've just knitted my very last stitch of this first row. It was a purl stitch. If your last stitch is not a purl stitch, you probably don't have an even number of stitches on your needle, and just go ahead and count those. If it's wrong, if it's too many, just go ahead and do a decrease at the end, and if it's too few, go ahead and do an increase. But mine was okay. So I'm finished now. There are no stitches left on this left hand needle, so we're just going to drop it just like we do for magic loop. pinch these stitches right here. Your hand's already there, so just go ahead and pinch them. Rotate everything around like that. Continuing to pinch the stitches, go ahead and pull this loop of cable. There we go, pulling it until, there we go, until that needle just comes to the stitches. Then we'll use our hand to push the needle the rest of the way into the stitches. And if I had cast on too tight, that would have been really, really hard. So that's another reason to do a nice even cast on. All right, so we can see here from the tail that since the tail isn't up here at the tip of the stitches, we've only done half of our round, and we can corroborate that by the fact that it's thicker here since we've done a row, and these are just cast on stitches. So it's time for us to do this other half. Now we're back to ready position, so you know what to do. Our yarn's already over here over the back needle just like it needs to be. So go ahead and pull that back needle out, bring it around. Our yarn's right where we need it. And go ahead and work in ribbing all along this half of your needle. I've just gotten to the end of the second half of this first sock. Now, don't be alarmed if you see something like this. The reason for it is because this is a cable, not a needle, and it's thinner than the needle. So once the needle is back onto these stitches, this will tighten up right here. Especially after you go a few rounds, this is going to completely disappear. If you have something like really, really big, like see, even if I pull it, it'll do that. And it's only because the stitches are sort of tightening up on this cable right here. If it's really, really big, just make sure that you're using your finger to hold the cable close to the needle every time you're just turning this corner right here. All right, so we're almost done with our first round. It's going to be a lot easier from now on, don't worry. All right, so keeping these socks close together, we don't want big gaps like this, so go ahead and slide them close. You can see a big gap can sometimes result in something like that happening, which can be really confusing, right? So go ahead and just scooch the stitches themselves, making sure that the loops are of equal size. And we're going to continue on. Oops, let's untwist that right there. We're going to continue on knitting the last stitches. Here we are. The last stitches of the second sock, and our yarn should be here. So again, working in ribbing. And see how I'm holding this nice and close as opposed to like this, like two lines. I'm sort of rounding the corner and keeping everything nice and close together, but not pulling it so tight that I won't be able to get the needle back into the stitches later. And we're done. Again, don't worry about this little stretched out join. It's only because there's no needle on it, and I'll show you that right now. So go ahead, there's no more stitches here, so go ahead and drop that needle, pinch these stitches, point your needle tips to the right, and go ahead and pull the cable, whoops. There we go, pulling the cable until it reaches the stitches. Go ahead and push the needle into the stitches like that, and let's get back to ready position. Okay, so that doesn't look right, right? Because the working yarn is on the front needle. It's okay, there's a really easy fix. Just go ahead and put it in the back. There we go. And spreading all of our stitches out like this. Let the tail hang down. There we go. So now we've got one round of knitting for our sock. Don't worry, it's going to start to go a lot faster. It's not going to be this slow. So, and you can see that now that the needle is back into the stitches, the joint isn't very big at all, and it'll close up once we do a few more rounds. So this is the order that we're going to be knitting the socks in. Here are our two loops, there they are, and our two balls of yarn. Now, to keep the yarn from tangling, every time you let go of it, make sure to put it to the side that your ball of yarn is. In order to do that, you're going to need to separate your balls of yarn, put either one, put them in two bags, one on either side of you, or on the floor, one on either side of you, but please do not do this and have them going into your purse or the same bag, because they'll totally get all twisted up. So keep them separate. And I'll give you some more tips about that as we go. But every time you let go of the yarn, just move it over to the side that has that ball of yarn. So we're going to continue knitting in the round like this. Just using magic loop and ribbing, we're going to go this half, go back to ready position, this half, and this half. Goes A, B, B, A, basically, around and around. Now continue in ribbing until you have at least an inch, although you can rib the entire cuff if you want to. After you have an inch of ribbing, you're going to want to work in stockinette stitch, which just means knit every single stitch all the way around for 7 inches from the edge of your cast on, which is right here, for the 2 smaller sizes, or 8 inches for the bigger size. Then it will be time to start our heel. So happy knitting, put in a good movie, and enjoy.